People in Calgary are making it clear to their political leaders they are saying no to the Olympics, effectively putting out the torch on the city's bid for the 2026 Winter Games and leaving the spirit of the 1988 Games as a feel-good memory. It's a no with national, even international implications. The vote possibly seen as a rejection of what has been a major sales pitch for big-ticket events, that spending billions on something like the Olympics can turn a city's fortunes around.
They tell you, spend millions, billions, good for you. It doesn't matter how much it costs, how much your property tax increase is going to be. Don't worry about it. You're going to feel good.
Real solutions that will fill up the office towers downtown, address our issues with unemployment, and really transform our economy in a more realistic way rather than, hosting the Olympics and hoping something will happen.
So cheers from the no side, forward-looking celebration. Leaders on the yes side, though, are taking comfort in the Olympic motto in defeat, saying it's the competition, not the result, that matters. 56% of Calgary's voters said no to pursuing an Olympic bid to host the 2026 Winter Olympic Games. Aaron Collins is covering the story, and he's at Winsport, which is the old Canada Olympic Park. Good to see you, Aaron, on this, and looking forward to the aftermath here. So, it was pretty clear from things the mayor said, the dream's done now.
Yeah, no means no in this case. And while we heard a lot about this not being a binding plebiscite, for all intents and purposes it was. And it was a clear mandate from the no side, from the no vote yesterday. More than half, well over half, 56% of Calgarians saying they're not interested in hosting the 2026 Games. Now, of course, there was money tied to this vote. The provincial government had said that they weren't going to be chipping in their $700 million contribution unless there was a yes vote today. That didn't happen, and Mayor Nenshi, of course, who's expended a fair bit of political capital on this campaign, said that he wouldn't be moving forward if there wasn't a yes vote as well. Have a listen to what he had to say last night.
Yeah. I think it's pretty clear that we saw a clear number. We saw a big voter turnout. And for me, that means that I ultimately take my direction from the citizens. So on Monday at City Council, we will have a little debate, which I anticipate will end in a vote to suspend this.
So a firm no there and a strong turnout, 40% of Calgarians turning out to say no. And, Calgary's joining a long list of communities that have decided that they're not interested in hosting the IOC's next party. So the IOC may be having some issues with this as well moving forward.
I think you're right. It's having a tremendous challenge finding host cities, both for summer and winter Olympic Games, those huge costs of security and infrastructure and the bills that mount, and what does it leave for the taxpayers? And yet those on the side who think it really creates atmosphere and spirit and certainly a sporting legacy, they see this as an opportunity lost for Calgary. Aaron, what's the real takeaway overall?
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of fronts where this, we can sort of suss this out. We're standing on the key legacy piece, or one of the key legacy pieces of the 1988 Games. This is Winsport, formerly known as Canada Olympic Park. This is where ski jumping happened, luge, bobsled, and part of this bid process was to give this place a facelift, to bring it back into the 21st century and keep it a world-class facility. That's not going to happen now, and there's questions about whether or not this facility has the kind of future that proponents of this bid were hoping it would. Now, this all comes down to dollars and cents, though. The no side simply said there wasn't enough assurances about what was going to happen if there were cost overruns at these Olympic Games, at potential Olympic Games. And of course, there generally are cost overruns. So essentially, the no side was saying, we don't know if we can afford this. This is a city that's been on sort of a low economic trajectory for the last 4 or 5 years since the price of oil crashed. There's 30% vacancy in the office towers downtown. There's a high unemployment rate. And this was just a price that the no side didn't think this city could afford to pay. Have a listen to what they think about last night's vote.
That's get the city back into the business of helping business, get the oil pipeline built, get the green line built. That's exactly what we need.
I am excited about the idea of continuing with the conversation about what else 2026, where else we want to go as a city.
So you can see the idea here is that 2026 it was not a good idea for this city. There's better ways that the city should be looking at spending the money, especially during an economic downturn like this. And what comes next? Well, we're going to have to see, but it certainly won't be the Olympics in 2026.
Scott and Michael and Signa all looking at the facts of this and the decision by Calgarians, 56%, not to proceed with that bid. And Michael, you heard John say, he said, host cities are on thin ice these days.
Yeah.
I mean, Calgary is just the latest, not the only, just the latest to say no.
Just latest even in this round, because take a look at this board, because we talk about Calgary and they actually joined 3 other cities. Take a look at this board, because not only is Calgary out, Sapporo, Japan, Graz, Austria, Sion, Switzerland, all of them have also dropped out. And like Calgary, heard similar arguments that the games are just too expensive to host. For example, there is a U.S. economics professor out there by the name of Andrew Zimbalist, and he says that every game in the last 50 years has gone over budget, most notoriously Sochi by $41 billion. And even the bid process is expensive. Chicago spent $100 million trying to get the 2016 games. It lost those games to Rio de Janeiro. So a lot of the critics say, listen, this is money that should go into other priorities. And also there's a bit of a shine off the Olympics right now because of all the controversies that have embroiled the IOC, among them the doping scandal involving the Russians in the Sochi games.
Exactly. I mean, this is all part of the IOC is very cognizant of this, Vision 2020, doing everything it can to make bidding for hosts, potential host cities, more enticing, more affordable, Scott.
Yeah, because they used to look for the most expensive bid. If you had new stadiums, new infrastructure, new ports, the IOC looked at that very favorably, but they're also acknowledging that that is costing cities an awful lot of money. So here's the IOC sort of reading the winds and with a little bit of a promotion on their own that, hey, it's not that expensive.
The new norm will touch every part of the operation, making best use of existing venues inside or outside the host country, sharing venues for different sports, and rethinking transport options so we can reduce the complexity of the games and increase its flexibility. Because the games adapt to the city does not adapt to the games.
So that is entirely new now out from the IOC, saying that, well, you don't have to spend all this money. It can be done cheaper. We will accept used stadiums, because we all know the stories about those brand new stadiums are sitting unused. So here's a bid recently by Rio. What it cost them, $11.3 billion. This is an old story that the original estimate was only $2.8 billion. And the vast majority of that is from taxpayers' pockets directly. And then, you talk about the benefits, which John even touched on. They're nebulous. They're about legacy, spirit, and that sort of thing. And that is becoming increasingly expensive as cities are running these massive deficits.
It's a big, big problem now for the IOC, because it's not just the ones you mentioned. It's Toronto, it's Rome, it's Budapest. I mean, we could go on and on and on. So, yes, reuse facilities, yes. Joint bids with other cities. I mean, this is all, they're trying to keep the power of the 5 rings. But for athletes, Signa, they know the power and they're disappointed by this.
They are, and you had to look at the faces of some of the people that we've talked to on this show. Helen Upperton, Olympic silver medalist from 2010, who had been lobbying for these games. Katrina Lebeydon, the great Olympic champion in speed skating. But here's the side of things from maybe their perspective. You can't put a price on pride. And Calgary, many were saying, was a city that needed this kind of boost after going through a recession, etc. Host nations tend to get a boost in the medal count. I guess you can count that. Let's just show you just host nations, just for bragging rights sake. Vancouver is host Canada, 26 medals, 3rd overall in the medals, but 1st in gold medals with 14 in those games. Sochi, of course, those tainted, 1st in both of those categories. And Korea, I mean, look at South Korea, not really a winter sports nation, would you say? However, they were tied for 6th in the total medal count. So, I mean, it does have this healthy legacy, and I say the health benefits of seeing these world-class athletes at that level. I just want to mention, Calgary was the favorite here. They were favored over Stockholm, over Milan and Cortina d'Ampezzo, because they had this funding formula, as much as people debated it, in place. They were the only bid city to have this in place. And now bid cities don't want to get involved outside of those Asian countries that we've seen, Pyeongchang, Tokyo, and Beijing, the next 3 Olympic cycles. what's the variety going forward going to look like? And these legacy cities, because Calgary's still very much a winter sports city, right? 175
Absolutely.
World Cup events held since 30 years ago.
And what happens in the future after those cycles, right? So.
Well, many people say you're either an authoritative country or you're a desperate country. Those are the only who are really interested in bringing the games, and that's a sad fact at this time. We've got to talk about this more, and we'll get a report from Calgary as well, and our reporter Aaron Collins in a couple of minutes more on the city's mood now that it has decided to stop right here on the bid. Thanks, guys, very much.
you.
Appreciate it. This is CBC News Network.